Hello and welcome to the video. This is a first look at this little thing here. This is the Peanut action camera. This one has come from Caddx FPV. Now I have been interested in getting a little camera like this, a little thumb-sized camera for the hobby for some time. In fact, I looked at the original Insta360 Go quite a few months ago now and was so unimpressed with that I actually gave it away in that video. This, however, is going to stay on the bench because it's actually performing really nicely. Now I've been lucky enough to have this a couple of weeks. I got it before release, so I haven't got access to all the website and all the information, and the only manual that I've had is the manual that's come in the box, which is basic. So some of the stuff I've had to figure out. There's a couple of things that this little fella does that has ticked quite a few boxes for me. I don't think it's perfect, but I'm excited that Caddx are working with people like Insta360 to actually bring us a version of this little thing that's more built around the hobby. So a couple of quick stats before we get into it. This is 27 grams. It's actually 28 on my particular scales here. The thing itself is based on the Insta360 Go 2 camera. That was the version that was released after I did my video and addressed a lot of the issues that I had with that very first Go camera. This has a much bigger battery. It'll record for about 30 minutes, whereas the Insta360 Go 2 will only record for about 10 minutes in flow state recording, and this has stabilization on it as well. Now I am a fan of the cameras that have the flow state stuff on. This is the one from Beta FPV. This is the SMO 4K camera. I know lots of people aren't fans of this, but personally I love it. It's a skeletonized camera. It's really lightweight. It lives on top of my Recon with the Caddx HD system at the back. And when you see flying footage in a review where I'm chasing a plane, the footage is coming off this thing. Now you do have to download the footage and put it through an app in post, and that then does all the stabilization. And I wasn't expecting this little camera to do that, but one of the modes actually allows you to shoot pretty much like a raw image, big square video frame, and then the stabilization can be applied to it. The other neat trick up its sleeve is you can mount it whichever way you want, and that is the way then it will kind of orientate the video. So this thing has a little accelerometer inside which allows it to do something pretty impressive. I've put it on the front of my Dolphin. We'll get into this in a minute, but this is the hacked up nose. Looks horrific, but actually the way it works is that this is at the front of the Dolphin and allows me to put the camera on there, and I've been flying the Dolphin and rolling it and doing the normal flying that I do, and this camera has produced some really nice stabilized footage out of it by using the recording and then the flow state stabilization in the app. There's a number of things that come in the box with it. The one that I've been using the most is this little thing here. This has a big magnet on the back, has the connector for it and a USB connector. Everything is magnetic, so that just snaps on the back, and that is how you access the files on it if you're not going to access it via your phone. There's a phone app, so you just download that and you can access it. The way the phone app works is really nice. It connects to it initially via Bluetooth, and then they kind of talk to each other and work out what the Wi-Fi network needs to be, and then switch over to the Wi-Fi network. Really cute way of doing it. But there is also a remote control piece in the box that allows you to connect it up to a flight controller. Details in the manual to set up the bits and pieces. At the moment I can only see Betaflight in the manual, but allow you to stop and start recording from within Betaflight, which is a real bonus too. A couple of last things before we get into the unboxing. The way the button works is a lot better from the Go 2 in my humble opinion. It's much easier to use for the hobby. It isn't proud in any way, so it's harder to press it by accident. And the other big bonus is this is expected to be about $60 cheaper than the Go 2 as well, which is again a big plus in my book, because I don't like putting lots and lots of expensive cameras on models. It really affects my flying enjoyment, because I like to fly and enjoy it, and if there's too many expensive things on a model, there is a little voice in the back of my head telling me that I have to be careful, because that's a lot of money to break and lose. So let's jump into the unboxing and show you how it comes in the box and what you get with it. So the box itself is a reasonable size. You have all of the information on the sides and on the back. This is exactly what we're going to find inside in a minute. Everything you need is in here, and there's even a couple of spare power cables. So if, like me, you're going to use it on various different models, it will allow you to have various different cables in different places. Now, there are lots of features in this little camera, but to get them all, you do need to access it via the app on the phone, because that's the way you can change how everything works. Now, that first piece of paper that I took out is actually really important, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So if we look at the manual here is the only one that I had access to, and it kind of shows you how to connect to it, to do things like the setup in Betaflight to start and stop it, how to actually charge it, and what the mount adapter is doing. The big thing to note is there's actually 6 modes on this, and I thought that one side of this card was English, the other side was another language, but no, you need to read both sides. Because if the camera is off, if you briefly press it once, it gives you standard recording, basic stabilization, and that by default is, I think it's 1440p, but you can turn it into different frame rates, different apertures, all kinds of pieces. 2 presses when the camera's off will get it to take a photo. However, if you press and hold the power button for a second to turn it on, and when the camera is on, then you press the button briefly, that starts recording, but this time it's in the flow state stabilization, which gives you this really weird video file that you can still see on your computer, but it just looks wacky, and that's why using an app then does all of the stabilization. 2 presses when it's on already will give you hyperlapse, and then press for 2 seconds or go to sleep. Now there's ND filters in the box, which is absolutely brilliant. There's a clear one attached to it already, and then the other 2 are there for brighter sunshine. All of the images and video I'm about to show you have not been using the ND filters. I just wanted to see what it looked like raw. And then this is the piece, as I just showed you, that kind of comes onto the back. This cover just screws off and allows you to change the lenses pretty easily. I have had issues with moisture getting under the lenses. Be aware of that. If you're flying or landing in particularly wet grass, any moisture is going to make its way under there and is going to make the lens a little bit smudgy. Now, this is the control piece. Now, initially I got really excited with this because I thought, oh great, maybe we can use this as an FPV camera as well. No, we can't. It snaps on the back in the same way, and there are a couple of wires out the back here that you can connect to your flight controller using the standard kind of FPV cables. There's a ground, a +5 volts, and there's also the signal wire that you can use to trigger start and stop. Using the 5 volts, you can also have this charging while you are using it. Now there is this case that goes around it as well that's nice and soft, and there is then a mounting bolt for you to put it onto a model. And then there's a couple of pieces of technology here that allow you to put it all together. The nice thing is that although the battery will only last for about 30 minutes, which is much longer than the Go 2, if you have it connected to a 5 volt supply in the model, it will keep that battery topped up. And the fact you get a couple of these cables is a really, really cute idea. Now that extra adapter does add a little bit of weight, but it does mean that we can fly for an entire day using this little thing if you have it backed up with this external 5 volt supply, and then use that other white cable if you have something like Betaflight to start recording. Last little piece in the kit is a little adapter that you can power from 2 to 4S and will give you the 5 volts you need to keep this powered. So that will be a great thing to connect onto your flight controller to keep this thing topped up in flight. Now, once you've got it all unpacked, then there are a couple of things you're going to need to do with your phone. Download the Insta360 app and then connect to this camera. The camera will appear in the application as a Go 2. And a couple of things you need to do. First of all, you're going to need to activate it. It will still work if you don't activate it, but once you've activated it, then you can do things like update the firmware. I'm still using the firmware that the camera was supplied to me for review at the moment. And you can also explore the settings in the app and set the camera to how you want to use it. 1440 versus 1080p, the frame rate, the kind of field of view that you want, and all of those different settings. It's definitely worthwhile when you get this thing, turning it on, pressing and holding the power button for 1 second to power it on, and then going through the process with the app. This is how you can also decide what all the button presses do and set the camera up to work for exactly how you want it to work. So the first flight that I did with this, I did a bit of testing in the garden. I'll show you that footage in a minute. And then I did a test on a quadcopter in one bright early morning. Now, this is what the stabilization, the flow state stabilization video looks like when it comes off the camera. You have this kind of weird square effect where it looks like you're looking at a globe that's rotating. However, if you import that into the Insta360 Studio, then magically it all kind of snaps into the right aspect ratio, and you can tweak a few things, and then once you're happy, you can save it down. And once I'd realized that that was how you use the camera, I started to have a lot of fun. So first of all, let's have a look at some of that footage from that flight with the quadcopter, and I'll also put in the DJI flying footage that was recorded in the DJI HD Goggles 2. So the video in the top left hand corner here is the DVR from the DJI goggles, and the video in the main screen is the stabilized video from the flow state video that we've just seen being processed. And you can see that the image looks really nice in terms of the saturation and the color. It looks great, and I can't help but want to chase this bird over the field. But you'll notice a couple of things. First of all is the lens distortion when compared to the DJI stuff is a lot less severe. But also you'll start to notice that the way that it's handling changes in direction using the flow state stuff is incredibly smooth. So some of the sharper moves, I mean, I'm trying to fly smoothly with this quadcopter anyway, just to try and capture some kind of cinematic footage. But if you look at the image from the flow state stabilized video in the main part of the video, and then compare it with the little wobbles and things that I'm getting straight from the unstabilized DVR footage, you can see how much nicer it is doing a job of flying. Now, if of course you're trying to capture lots of hard banking turns and aggressive FPV flippy floppy flying, this is going to smooth a lot of that out. However, if you're just out to fly around and get some lovely footage, this is actually doing a really nice job, and I do like the image that's coming off this. It's a little bit dark, but then you know what? I'm not using an ND filter with this. Again, this is a very bright morning. The sun is out, so the sky is bright, but there's no direct sunshine on the ground. It's handling the exposure really nicely, and the color saturation is good. It's actually very close to what it looks like the crops are getting ready to be harvested in these fields. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. Let me just see what the audio is like, because you probably heard from that, it does actually record audio too. So let me just show you some footage that I shot in the garden, and I'll shut up and I'll let you actually hear the unedited, uncleaned audio from the camera. So here we are in the garden. Thought I'd just show you the pumpkin patch as we are. Got a nice big spider there. I'll try not to disturb him. But we have one of the warty ones here. We have another one hidden in there. You probably can't see him. As you can see, the pumpkins have gone absolutely mad. So the biggest fella, get over here, is this one. There we go. Ready for Halloween next month. But hopefully this is a good idea of what the audio actually sounds like from a camera, and gives another kind of use case for how you can actually get it going. Oh, I've just noticed there is one hidden up there. That's going to be interesting to see how that goes as it gets bigger and heavier. And as you can see, the audio from the camera, considering the size of the little opening at the side, isn't bad at all. I'd be quite happy to use this in some videos, but it also means there's a really nice clear audio track if you're syncing the video to something else, maybe doing some recording. So now I've done those tests and I'd actually watched back the stuff from the quad, I thought, you know what? Let's actually put this on the front of my Dolphin and actually go out and fly around and do some rolls and some flying like I fly it normally and just see what it makes of that. Again, using the flow state stabilization to see how it worked. And here is the result. Again, in the main image is the flow state stabilized video from the camera. In the top left hand corner is the video from my DVR in my Fat Shark goggles. I'm flying this model analog. Now what you'll notice as I start to fly around is again the flight is very, very stable even when I'm doing hard banking turns. I'm guessing this is because it's recording pretty much the entire image that the sensor is getting. The flow state stabilization is doing a great job at trying to handle that. There is a little bit of horizon drift, which I quite like. That might be from the G-forces that have been created as I do these banking turns. But again, this is a really, really nice image. Probably not what you want if you want to record your hard 3D flying or your flippy floppy quad stuff, but if you want to fly around and get some very smooth, stabilized video, this little 27 gram camera is actually doing a great job. Okay, it's not 4K, but in terms of the image and the color reproduction, it's actually doing a really good job. And as you just saw, I actually did a roll there, and although the kind of image bounced around a little bit because I wasn't doing a very good job of managing my elevator, the image kind of stayed level. Now I personally like to edit the video in the flow state stabilization stuff. I'm used to doing that with the Beta FPV SMO 4K camera, and I like the control that that gives me. So this feels very comfortable to me. You do need a pretty powerful PC to use all the flow state stuff, but this crisp autumn morning with a really bright sun, a really bright sky, and a nice bright ground as well, the camera is just performing beautifully, and it's making me look like a much smoother pilot than I would be normally. Now, until now, I haven't had a camera that would fit onto something like the nose of my Dolphin in the way that I want, because I don't want lots of weight there. The way I've built it means that I don't have a lot of choice in terms of cameras that would go up from the front. However, with this thing, it works beautifully. Maybe I get another one, and then I can also have a rearward view, which will be quite funny for when we're doing the FPV combat stuff. So I don't think I can call this a review yet, because I've only had this a couple of weeks and been playing with it, but hopefully from some of the footage that you've seen, you could see why I am initially nice and impressed. Gonna need a little bit longer, and I may do like an owner's review once I've had this several months. This is going to be one of those things that just keeps getting flown and stuck on stuff, because it will fit in lots of different places and on lots of different models. I love the fact that this little 27 gram thing has kind of regular video shooting with a bit of stabilization, but also will do the flow state stabilization, and the internal battery will last for nearly half an hour. I think 30 minutes is a bit tough, but if you put a little adapter on the back to give it a 5-volt supply, then you know what, it'll just keep going and going and going until the internal memory fills up. I love the fact that it will support different types of mounting and orientation. I always wanted to be able to kind of sync one of these so just the recording part was stuck out the top of a wing or plane to reduce the amount of drag. This will do that, but it'll also record horizontally, and that's the way I've been using it with the models here so far. I like the fact there are ND filters in the box. That's a really nice touch, and if you're flying in bright days, those ND filters make a huge difference and do dramatically improve the quality of the image. The video performance is good. I'm rendering my stuff out in 1080p. You know, if you want a 4K camera, this isn't going to be the one that's going to float your boat. But the control of it with a single button, once you've got the hang of it, is actually really easy and straightforward to do. The color and the image and the video, I'm really happy with for something this small. And the audio, as you've heard, isn't bad either. I'd be quite happy to use this as a vlogging cam if space was a real problem. Couple of things to be aware of that I found in my initial testing. First of all is that it does get very warm in operation, so make sure there is a bit of airflow. If it did sink it into foam, you'd have to make sure there was some air going through the inside of the model, because it does get quite warm in operation. Not too warm to touch, nowhere near that hot, but be aware that that's the case. I did get some moisture under the lens in that dolphin flight in particular. These lenses don't appear to be completely waterproof, so be careful of that if you're flying in conditions that are quite wet. The internal memory is only about 32 gig. Now in the playing that I've done here, it's about 5 megabits per 1 second of unstabilized video, so it'll last for a long time, but you can download and delete things from the app on the phone. So I'd recommend, before you go flying, make sure you connect it up to your computer, make sure you've got all the files off it, and then completely delete everything, because there's no SD card or any way to kind of swap things around. That might have been nice. There are a couple of things that I would have loved to see on this. First of all is the ability to get one of these without a battery on it at all, to be able to run it from a 5-volt supply or even directly from the battery inside the model. So have a little 5-volt BEC in here would be fantastic, and potentially would save a lot of weight. That's how I use this other camera here, this skeletonized one, and lots of us are quite used to plugging it into the main battery power to fly, and then you don't have to worry about adding the bigger battery in here to get the longer recording times. But having a battery in here does mean that you can not only use it in your RC equipment, but potentially it could be a cap cam, it could be lots of other things too. The idea of having everything snap onto the back is an interesting idea, but personally I would have liked to have had the little ports as part of the camera, because when you add these pieces at the back, it does make it physically quite a bit bigger. So having something like the USB port on here, or the power port, I think would have been quite nice. Who knows, maybe Caddx will bring out a version that is a skeletonized version which will allow that to happen and keep this as small and light as possible. The other thing I spotted is the mount that's supplied with this isn't a standard GoPro style connection at the bottom. I have designed and 3D printed my own adapter, if that's the kind of mount that is already on your model. I'll put a link to my Thingiverse page where I've shared that if you want to pop something like this on a model that already has an existing GoPro style connector. It's an interesting choice, but I do have a couple of models that this particular case goes onto and works nicely, but for lots of others that adapter is needed in order to pop it on. So in summary, this gets a thumbs up from me. Initial impressions and the initial testing has gone very, very well. This isn't, as I said at the beginning, perfect for me. There are lots of things that could have been done. I do like the fact that it is so easy to operate. I like the fact it's so small and lightweight. I like the fact it's so easy to use with an app on your phone. And I also like the fact that you can do the flow state stabilization in the app in post. That suits the way that I like to work and allows me to kind of tweak the way that I want flow state to work. I'm a big fan of the way that this thing kind of doesn't care about orientation. Depends on how you want to mount it, it'll kind of work that way, and that makes it incredibly versatile. And it's useful for those places where a larger, heavier camera just wouldn't work. For some, the lack of a 4K recording option is going to be a bit of a drawback, but if you want that, there are other cameras about. But I'm interested to see what else Caddx comes up with things like this camera. It's exciting to see them wander into the world of action cameras and to modify this camera so that it is more suited for the hobby. But hopefully we get that skeletonized one with all the ports on the back, so you don't have to keep finding the extra pieces to plug it into your computer, and then we could use it pretty much everywhere in the hobby. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that, if you're trying to learn a topic, will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.